Okay, so we're going to look at this question about treating animals as a commodity. And what I want you to understand is how the 12-mark structure with its sentence starters that you have in the front of your book, how that works and how that helps you to write a high quality 12-mark answer. And on the left, I've outlined how you choose the arguments from the evaluation sheet and order them so that when you put them into the 12-mark structure, you're getting a clear overall argument with a high level of evaluation. And the main idea is that you start by giving a clear statement of your own viewpoint, whether you agree or disagree with the statement. Then you explain the view that you are rejecting and why you reject it. Then you're going to move on to your own view and explain and argue why it's stronger. In this example, I'm going to argue in favor of the statement, and so therefore I'm going to start with an argument against the statement. And you can see I'm going to start with the quote from Genesis 1:26 that Lynn White had considered to be a cause of kind of the destruction of the environment and our poor treatment of animals. So having stated the view that I disagree with and an argument for it, I now need to show why I consider that not to be a strong argument. And so I'm going to bring in this idea of stewardship and argue that Lynn White and others are wrong to think of the image of God and ruling over animals as an excuse for mistreating God's creatures. Having selected these two arguments, I can put them next to each other, as you can see there, and then what I need to do is transform them into the 12-mark structures. So use kind of select from the sentence starters. I may need to adjust them slightly, but using those sentence starters to then put that content, those two arguments, into that structure to start my argument. And this is what it looks like. So as you can see, I've taken the content from the evaluation sheet. I've used the sentence starters, but some places I've adjusted or adapted the sentence starters to keep the flow going. And I've also added a few points just to develop the argument. And again, to give it that the detail and also to keep it flowing. Let's just read through it quickly so you can see what's going on. So I've written, I agree with this statement as Christians should respect animals as creatures made by God. So I've given my viewpoint and a very brief reason why I'm arguing that. Some Christians would disagree because Genesis 1:26 gives humans authority over animals, that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. They argue that this means animals can be used by Christians however they like. Again, you might want to kind of make the quote a bit briefer, and you also might want to introduce it because in the Bible it says, or something like that. Now I'm going to explain why it's a weak argument. So this is a weak argument because the right to rule over animals must be exercised in a loving way to reflect God's character. For example, humans rule as made in the image of God, and so must be understood as stewardship and therefore involves care for animals. Again, you might want to rephrase that a little bit to make it flow better. So now I'm going to start the second part of my answer where I need to positively argue for my point of view. So I need to select an argument that I think is stronger and develop that. It's important then to also consider how the opposite view might respond to your argument. So now I need to select a view against the statement that's going to kind of contrast with mine and criticize my view. Having done that, I want to respond to that argument so that by considering the opposite argument and then showing why it doesn't work, that adds strength to my own argument. You can see that now this second part of your 12-mark answer has got a kind of sandwich structure where you have your viewpoint that criticized by the opposite viewpoint, but then you're going to show why the criticism doesn't work. And then what we need to do is take that content from the evaluation sheet and then transform that into the 12-mark structure using the sentence starters. Again, remember, you might need to add points to the content that you've got on the evaluation sheet. You might need to adjust the sentence starters. They're all a guide to kind of help structure what you're writing. So you can see here how I've taken those key arguments from the evaluation sheet and transform them into the 12-mark structure. And as before, that sometimes means adjusting or rephrasing the sentence starters and also adding a bit more explanation, a bit more detail into the content that I've taken from the evaluation sheet. So let me just read through so you can see what it looks like. So a stronger argument is all living beings were created by God, and it is immoral to treat an animal without care, even if it would benefit humans. This is because humans are made in God's image and so should reflect his love to his creatures and not treat them as commodities. And you can see how I've developed that, and in particular how I've linked the language of the statement, this idea of commodities. I've linked that into my answer, so that's a good feature of what I've done here. Some Christians might respond and argue that humans are superior to animals as they do not have souls, and as such it is acceptable to use them as required for human benefit. However, I would argue that while they can be used for human benefit, causing needless suffering is wrong. This is important because the Catholic Church teaches that it is contrary to human dignity to cause animals to suffer or die needlessly. So again, you can see how I've added a few points and how I've worked in, because once you've chosen which arguments you're using, you might need to adjust the content a little bit to show how each argument responds to the previous one. The final thing that you'll need to do, which I haven't shown on this slide, is obviously to write a conclusion. So just a summary statement saying that I agree with the statement and why, what the key idea is, possibly just repeating the strongest point, that being made in the image of God means caring for and being stewards of God's world, something like that. Okay, I hope that's helpful. You can now use those ideas, use the ideas from the evaluation sheet and create your own answer.